Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues and welcome to the first ever episode of the Mighty Blues podcast. Now, if you're wondering what's going on, if you're wondering where I have been, you obviously haven't seen the video that I uploaded earlier on this morning. Actually recorded it last night and it was meant to go up last night with the thought that I was going to record the first episode of the podcast today, but for some reason or another, I was a little bit scared to upload it last night. I was a little bit apprehensive. I didn't know what people would think. I didn't know what people would say. I didn't know how people would react to it. And it sat in my YouTube content page on private for, pretty much the entirety of yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening. And I don't know, I woke up this morning and something come upon me and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to upload it. If it gets a negative response, it gets a negative response, so be it. But, I need to say what I've got to say and I need people to understand where I'm coming from. And I just want to say before we do go into this episode of the podcast, firstly, just in case anything was confused in the previous video, my plan for the channel now is to do one video a week in a sort of podcast type of form. These will be available on platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stuff to listen to, but they will also be available on the Mighty Blues YouTube. I'm not making a new channel. I'm not creating a new identity. I'm not changing anything. Merely the amount of content and the demand for the content that obviously has been happening over the course of the last few years of doing the channel. So this is the first episode of the Mighty Blues podcast. It will be a weekly podcast where we talk about everything that has gone on in the world of Everton for the previous week. I'm not going to talk again about the reasons for doing this, because if you haven't checked out that video and you're wanting to know the reasons for me making this decision, then go and check that out. It's all explained in that video. But just to explain a little bit more about what this is going to be, it's going to be a weekly podcast. I'm going to aim to do it every Wednesday. Now, obviously, that might change if Everton play on a Wednesday, or if something else is going on. We'll change it to a Tuesday or a Thursday or whatever suits. But for now, I'm going to try and aim for it to be a Wednesday, every Wednesday. And we're going to talk about what's happening in the world of Everton. We're going to talk about the previous game that has taken place the weekend before. In this case, obviously the game against West Ham on Saturday, which we'll delve into a little bit later on. And we're going to talk about the game upcoming, as I said, in this case, that game against Manchester United at Old Trafford. Just briefly, the reason for doing this is because it helps take a lot of the stress off the situation with Everton at the moment, only having to do sort of one episode per week and getting everything out in that one episode, and not having to worry about running home from Goodison Park after we've been beaten by West Ham and getting 3 or 4 videos out, and the stress and anxiety that comes with all of that. I thought, you know what, it got to a point on Saturday, as I said in the video we uploaded today, where something needed to change, and I had 2 options really: stop the channel and just stop it there and see if, maybe come back to it in a few months' time, but for now, just leave it as it is, or try and change up the content a little bit, try and adapt the content to make it a little bit easier and a little bit less pressured, and I decided I'm going to go with option 2 for the time being, and we'll see how this goes. Like I said, absolutely nothing is going to change in terms of the visuals. You'll still be able to watch this podcast. As you can see, my hair is absolutely all over the place and in desperate need of a haircut. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, you won't know that anyway, so you won't care. But before we get into the actual agenda items for today's episode, I do want to talk about that game against West Ham, because I know a lot of people were wondering what my thoughts were on Saturday when obviously there was no instant match reaction. I just want to take a second to say thank you all so much. I have been inundated with unbelievably kind messages for the entirety of today. I didn't think for a million years that this video would get the response that it has. As I said yesterday, I was absolutely terrified to upload it. I recorded it yesterday afternoon with no script or no sort of thought process of what I was going to say or along which lines I was going to go. I just pressed record, poured my heart out, pressed upload, and then, like I said, I sat on it for a number of hours because I didn't know how people would take it. I didn't know whether people would take the piss. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't know whether opposition fans would use it as an excuse to sort of jump on and go, you're walking away, you're no football fan, this, that, and the other. And that would have, wouldn't obviously have helped the situation. But it's safe to say that that wasn't the case. I didn't expect this, but I am absolutely eternally grateful for every single one of you that has written a comment and and messaged me about the video and hoping that I'm okay and wishing me well and saying things like this is a good decision for you and for your mental health and for your family, and we'll all still be here and we'll all still be watching and we'll all still be tuning in. I honestly can't thank you enough, and there's a reason as to why I decided to make this sort of a podcast as opposed to just completely, stopping the channel and not uploading anymore. And that's because I sort of sat there and I thought to myself, there probably is, even if there's just one or two people that watch my videos after every game and find a little bit of comfort in the fact that I'm feeling the same way as they do, I don't want to let those what I thought was one or two people down. I don't want to be, I don't want to for them to think, well, I've got nobody to conversate with now because Cam's not doing his videos or not doing his reactions anymore. And I thought, you know what? If I can adjust it and I can make it a little bit easier and I can make it a little bit more focused on sort of one day, one episode, one discussion, then maybe it'll be a little bit easier. Never did I think that I'd have hundreds of comments supporting what I was doing and people generally being so lovely and so kind. I've just sat there before while I was meant to be working, getting quite emotional and quite tearful at some of the comments I was reading. People were being so loving and so supportive, and I honestly cannot thank you enough. And what you have done for me is in my lowest moments since starting the channel, and probably my lowest moments with Everton Football Club really in my life, you have made me realise that this isn't the end of the world, and it isn't the most important thing in life, and there's various other things that are much more important than Everton and football. But also B, that what I do is appreciated and understood, and what I do is helpful to others as well. It's not just me coming on and ranting and screaming and raving for the sake of it. We're a community, we're a group, we're almost like a family, and that's what I felt today reading all of them comments. I felt like, oh my God, I've got a family of people here that are backing me, that are supporting me. Not just Evertonians. I've had Spurs fans, I've had Newcastle fans, I've had fans of other clubs saying, hope you're okay, mate, wishing you well, we'll support you in anything you do. And that just means everything to me, because on Saturday evening, I felt like anything and everything to do with Everton Football Club, including this channel, was just a complete waste of time at the moment because of how down and how absolutely distraught I was. And you all have made me realise that that isn't the case whatsoever. And that whilst Everton might be, an absolute SHIT show at the moment, this channel is a place of solace where we can all come and discuss and talk. And to think that there was so many people that were willing to go out their way and write, some quite long, detailed comments in support of me to help me out. I honestly, I can't thank you all enough. I really, really can't thank you all enough. I've even had comments that, of people discussing their personal experiences, and it's pretty much exactly what I went through. And they've got a solution to it. They've said, but don't worry, mate. You'll get it. It'll get better. And it's helped me. It's not just cases of people saying, "Oh, I hope you're all right." Genuine, helpful comments that are heartful, and people have taken time out of their day to write. So thank you all so much for that. I didn't expect this response. Anxiety, I don't want to go into this too much because I've spoken about it in that video, but anxiety and OCD is something that I've struggled with throughout my entire life. And since starting this channel, this has been something that started as a form of almost I don't want to say medication for my anxiety, but a form of relief for my anxiety, if you like, because I'd come on here, I'd have a little chat, I'd have a little rant, and then often I'd be okay then. I wouldn't really be too angry about Everton because I'd come on and I'd had me chat. But as the years went on, and as yeah, I don't know if many of you know much about OCD, but um, mine triggers especially on routine. And if I am in a routine, it's very, very difficult for me to come out of that routine without it being a sort of end of the world thing situation in my head. And I got myself into a routine of making 4 videos for every one game of football, and then making 2 or 3 other videos a week, discussing various other things. And you might look and you might think, Cam, that's nothing, a couple of videos, an hour or so out your day, but it all piles on top of each other, and you don't realise when it's just you doing this and you've got all of this content to do. Everton play on a Wednesday and then Everton play on a Saturday, so you've got it piles on top of you, and it's not as easy for me to say, oh, I haven't got time, or I'm too busy to do that, so I'll just leave that instant match reaction and I'll just do a review in a couple of days and then I'll do a preview. I can't do that. My OCD doesn't let me do that without it being a huge, huge problem. I've got to get those videos in. I've got to get those videos done. So, thank you all so much for understanding. This will definitely be a positive move for the channel, and it'll definitely be a positive move for me because it'll help me have a little bit more time to sort of reevaluate, less pressure and less stress on the situation. And if Everton put a terrible performance in and I want to turn the telly off and not think about them for a couple of days, I can do that now, whereas previously I couldn't. But like I said, I just want to say a huge, huge thank you to each and every one of you, because honestly, reading your messages today, and I've got them up now and I'm reading them and I'm in the process of going through and replying to all of them, it's helped me tenfold. It's absolutely helped me tenfold, and it's made me realise that, I shouldn't just throw this away because Everton are in an absolute shit show at the moment. I should try and make it work, and if that means cutting back, then that means cutting back. But there's a community of people here who, a lot of whom I've never met. A lot of whom, if they ever walk past them in the street, I wouldn't notice them because I've never seen their faces. But these messages today have sort of made me, realise and almost wish that I had met you all and I could personally thank you and go and buy you a pint and this and that, because you have hugely, hugely helped my situation. So thank you all so, so much. I really, really do appreciate it. You've given me the motivation to do this video today, to be honest with you. I had the idea to do the podcast, but I was going to leave it for a couple of weeks. I was going to wait. I was going to leave it for a couple of weeks and sort of, see how things go and play it by ear, really. But I just wanted to get stuff off my chest yesterday. And when I uploaded that video and the response I had, I thought, no, do you know what? Let's crack on. Let's get our heads down and let's do this. And my personal issues I'll work through, and I'll work through knowing now full well that football and Everton Football Club, whilst it is hugely important to us and very much our lives, it isn't more important than family. It isn't more important than happiness and well-being and health. And I think that's a really, really important lesson to take. And also, as well, I haven't just been reading comments today of people saying, oh, hope you're well, Cam, and we're always here. I've read a lot of comments about people and their personal experiences, and a lot of people who have written that they really, understand and associate with what I'm going through, and they're going through very similar things themselves. And I just want to say, if any of you are struggling with this in the same way I am, or maybe a different way I am, but if you are struggling with Everton at the moment and what Everton are going through and the way Everton are and the way things are at the moment, then please, please, please do not hesitate to A, message me, or B, talk to somebody about it, because, other than my missus, I never really talked to anybody about this. So nobody really knew. As far as they was concerned, I was just angry at the game, and I didn't want to do videos anymore because I was angry. But the moment I opened up and started to discuss what was going on, the moment other people were able to discuss with me what they were going through, and I think talking is absolutely huge and helps massively in these situations. So if you are someone that's struggling with it at the moment, please don't hesitate to contact me, tweet me, comment, and we'll have a discussion, because I'm sure the majority of the fan base at the moment is really, really, really struggling to cope with what's going on with Everton at the minute, because it is just an absolute shit show. And although it's not a massively important thing in the grand scheme of life, you can't you can't tell any of us that, whilst I appreciate and understand now that life is much more important than football, and Saturday evening made me very much realise that. There's very little you could have said to me on Saturday afternoon when that second goal went in for West Ham, which would have made me realise that, because of the emotion and the anger and the frustration. So if you are struggling and you can relate to what I said in that video, then please don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'll discuss it. So yeah, on to the West Ham game then. Just a little bit about what I'm going to do with this podcast that, across the next sort of few weeks and months or so. Obviously we're coming towards the latter end of the season. I'll be honest, this is very much still in its prototype stage. This wasn't, this hasn't been something that has been planned for months and months and months. This hasn't been a sort of date in the calendar where I've thought, right, after that West Ham game, I'm going to change the whole channel around and I'm going to make it a podcast. This is a decision that I thought of whilst watching a film with the missus on Saturday night. I was sat there and I thought to myself, right, I've not really got any other option here. I'm just going to have to put the channel on hold, leave it for, until at least the summer, and then assess where we are in the summer and go from there. And then all of a sudden I thought, do you know what? Maybe I could just do one video a week, one episode a week, if you like, where I discuss everything. I get it out the way. It's an hour out my day. And then I can sort of focus more on, as I said, improving myself mentally. So there's not really a plan at the moment. There will be, obviously our long-term plan is to get guests on and have a permanent sort of co-host so we can bounce off of each other. I'm not quite sure who that will be yet. If you're interested in that, please let me know in the comments or on social media, and we'll sort that out. We're gonna obviously introduce comment sections a little bit later on into the podcast, where we go through some of the comments in the chat and talk about them. And various other bits and bobs that I'm sure will come in, and ideas that I will have over the course of the next few weeks. But I didn't want to sort of make the decision and then spend 2 or 3 weeks thinking about how I was going to structure it before I come back. What I wanted to do was just sort of trial it, get into it, and improve it as it goes on, because I know in a couple of months' time we've got the summer, and then I'll have a whole sort of few months to really nail it down and get some ideas in and get a proper structure for it. But for now, it's pretty much just going to be the same as it's been, only once a week, and the videos will probably be a little bit longer, or the subjects, the topics we talk about will be talked about for a little bit shorter, so we can get them all in. So I hope that's okay. If it isn't, there's not many other options for me at this moment, unfortunately, because, as I said, I've got to focus a lot of my energy elsewhere now, because I think it's really important that I do so. But yeah, anyway, let's get on to the West Ham game, because you're probably thinking, Cam, lad, we get it. What did you think about the West Ham game? I didn't do an instant match reaction, obviously. I didn't do a player ratings, and since I haven't spoke about the performance and about the results, and I'm sure that's pretty self-explanatory as to why I didn't think going into the game that I wouldn't be doing an instant match reaction. I didn't think going into the game that I wouldn't be doing a player ratings, but as we explained earlier today, that all changed. I was hugely disappointed again. Now, obviously, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and I've had 4 or 5 days now to calm down and really sort of assess it and really sort of think about it and take the emotion away from it, which always helps. On Saturday evening, I was as close to being done with Everton Football Club as I've ever been. I was done with the manager, I was done with the players, I was done with the absolute impending doom that is every time we seem to go to Goodison Park at the moment. Obviously, as the days go on and as things become calmer and things become a little bit less, less emotional and less heightened, you start to look at it in a bit of a different light. And for me, I still think it's a really, really, really poor result. Now, yes, I think Everton had more than enough opportunities in the game to win it. And if you look at the actual sort of timeline of the game, I mean, West Ham scored their second goal in the 91st minute and their third goal in the 95th minute. So the scoreline probably doesn't quite tell the story of the game. In fact, it doesn't. 22 shots for Everton compared to West Ham's 12. We had 11 on target and they had 5, 55% possession. Everton were generally the better team in the game. We were generally the team that were in more control. We were generally the team that looked like winning the game. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. That only matters if you've got players with the ability and the confidence to convert the chances that you're creating. To have 22 shots at goal and 11 of them be on target and only score one goal for me is really, really, really poor, especially when you consider some of the chances we had again in this game. And I let the emotion get to me on Saturday, as we've already discussed. And one of the things I tweeted after the game was that I was done with the manager, done with the players, done with everything. And I got a lot of stick about that at the time because people didn't seem to understand why I was having a go at the manager. People didn't seem to understand what my issue was with Sean Dyche. And I understand it a little bit in hindsight because obviously, like I've just said, we were clearly the better team on the stats, and I don't think it's Sean Dyche's fault that Beto missed a couple of huge opportunities, and I don't think it's Sean Dyche's fault that Jack Harrison, was absolutely dreadful, or Dwight McNeil wasn't very good. However, I just remembered how poorly Frank Lampard was received in his period where Everton weren't winning games of football, and how poorly Rafa Benitez was received in his period when Everton weren't winning games of football, and how poorly all of the other previous managers have been received in periods when we've been losing games. And yes, I appreciate it. Sean Dyche has had a much, much, much more difficult hand than any of those managers I've just mentioned. And yes, I appreciate Everton should be much higher in the table than what we currently are because we've had the points deduction, and that isn't any fault of the manager or the players. I get it completely, and I'm not by any sense of the imagination saying that Sean Dyche is the absolute worst manager in the world and we should sack him and we should move on from him. However, I'm also not willing to sit here and blindly defend him when we haven't won a game of football since December and we done more than enough to win that game and didn't come away with the win. Now, yes, we can put that on the players all we like. Yes, we can, we can point our fingers at the players and say, you, and you aren't good enough. But the manager's job is to, A, improve these players, which he doesn't seem to be doing at the moment because they don't seem to be any different than what they were 2 months ago. And B, set them up in a way that wins games of football. Not necessarily has 22 shots at goal, but wins games of football. And I get it. I get people will say, well, Cam, if Dyche sets them up to have 12 shots on target and Beto or Calvert-Lewin puts every shot right into the goalkeeper's hands or skies them, then what's he meant to do? I get it. I'm not saying it's entirely his fault. I'm not saying he's the only culpable person in this situation. What I'm saying is Everton haven't won a game of football since December, the middle of December, nearly 3 months. And that, for me, is hugely concerning. And I don't think the manager is completely to blame for that. But I also don't think he's been an absolute 100% perfect manager in that period of time. I think he's made mistakes with his team selection. I think he's made mistakes with his substitutions. And one absolutely huge mistake he made on Saturday afternoon for me was allowing Beto to take that penalty. Now, I had a little bit of a discussion with somebody that sits in front of me in the game on Saturday afternoon who asked me, well, who else takes the penalty? Now, for me, that was quite a silly sort of analysis for me. And I'm not saying it's a silly opinion. I get it. He's the striker. He's the centre forward. We haven't got a dedicated penalty taker. I get it. But anyone and their dog watching that game of football or sat inside that stadium could have told you that Beto was not scoring that penalty. He just missed a huge opportunity 5 minutes before, where he went one-on-one with the goalkeeper and hit it straight at him instead of dinking it over him. Again, confidence issue, maybe. Quality issue, maybe. But one of the two. So either it was a confidence issue or a quality issue. Now, that tells me that he isn't ready to take a penalty. Our first and only penalty of the season, by the way. Of course, it's missed. But the minute he stepped up, I thought to myself, why? What? Whose decision is that? Is that the manager's decision? Is that the captain's decision? Has Beto just gone over and picked the ball up and plodded it down? And listen, as I said earlier, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Had he have scored it, we wouldn't be sitting here and having this conversation. Of course we wouldn't. But the point is I think more people believed he wouldn't score it than he would. And that shows you that the confidence the fan base has in him isn't there at the moment because of his previous performances. And like I said, for me, I'm a big believer in putting a player on a penalty who you believe will score the penalty. Not putting a player on the penalty because of his position in the team. Not putting a player on a penalty because he might have scored a couple of goals and be on a hat-trick. Not putting a player on a penalty because he's not scored in months and he wants to end his goals out. No, I'm a firm believer of you put on that penalty who you believe is the best penalty taker at the club. Now, I've got nothing against Beto. He got his goal on Saturday. Really good header. Should have had more. Some people will say, well, it's more than Dom's done, etc., etc. Listen, first season in the Prem, we know he's struggling to settle a little bit. We know he's struggling for game time. I get it. I've got nothing against them whatsoever. However, I don't care if he's a centre-forward. I don't care if he's a striker who wants to score and wants to take the penalty because he wants to he wants to get on the score sheet. I'll tell you now, in my opinion anyway, and people can disagree with this, but in my humble opinion, both Jordan Pickford and James Tarkowski are better penalty takers than Beto. Now, I'm not saying Jordan Pickford or James Tarkowski should have taken that penalty, but what I'm saying is it should have been given to the best penalty taker on the pitch at the time, and I refuse to believe that was Beto. Even though he's a striker, even though he might bang them in training, it's not about that. It's about that high-pressured situation. If James Tarkowski would have stepped up to take that penalty, you know what you would have got from him. He would have rifled it with his boot, and even if the keeper had got a hand on it, it would have been incredibly difficult for him to have saved it. It wouldn't have been anything special. He wouldn't have tried to put it top corner or dink it or whatever. He'd have just rifled his foot through it with all of his power, and it would have likely gone in. Had it have not gone in, I don't think many people would have said, why didn't you put Beto on it? Because it was Beto's first start in however long, and he'd already in that game missed a huge, huge opportunity. Huge opportunity in a huge game. By the way, let's not forget this was a game that Everton needed to win. We needed to win it. And again, I know there's a lot of people who will blindly defend Sean Dyche until, until the cows come home, and refuse to criticise anything he does. I get it. I absolutely get it. And I'm not saying that he was the only person at fault on Saturday, but that decision for me was wrong. It was wrong. James Garner, as I said, Tarkowski, even Jack Harrison, who I don't think is great, as you all know, and I thought was absolutely horrendous on Saturday. But I'd fancy him from the penalty spot to be able to convert, more so than Beto. But the manager went with Beto, or whoever's decision it was went with Beto. He missed the penalty, and that penalty come at a huge, huge point in the game, by the way. West Ham were not massively involved. They were, they had a couple of opportunities, but Everton with the team getting forward, Everton with the team attacking. As we said, we had that chance with Beto where he should have done better. He has to do better with it. He hit it straight at the goalkeeper. We had another couple of sort of half opportunities that went our way, shots that went just wide or went out for corners, and that was our opportunity to go 1-0 up and really sort of solidify. Right, okay, we're ahead in this game now. Let's let's do something with this. Let's make the most of this. Relatively early on in the game, in the first half, of course, would have been a huge, huge boost for us, and I just don't think that was the right decision. I just don't think that was the right decision for him to take that penalty. I just don't. Because ultimately, we saw what happened, and yes, okay, we continued in the game, we continued to put pressure on them, we continued to get forward, we continued to create opportunities. Beto eventually does get his goal. Unbelievable cross by James Garner, by the way. James Garner done more on that right-hand side in 6 seconds than Jack Harrison did in 90 minutes, which is worrying in itself. Beto gets his goal, and then, once again, a little bit like the game against Brighton, we scored. We had the upper hand. We were the better team. We were the team in control. We were the team, pushing forward and trying to go and win the game. And the minute we scored, it all fell to bits. It all fell to bits. We didn't know what we were doing anymore. Defensively, we conceded a corner, which is very uncharacteristic of us. And then, as I said, we went on and conceded a couple of goals towards the end of the game as well. And by that point, I was absolutely furious because I just watched Everton have 22 shots in a game of football and only put one of them in the back of the net and still managed to lose the game 3-1. And for as much as people keep defending the manager and keep saying, oh, well, this isn't a must win and that isn't a must win, the reality is there's not many games of football left to be played. Everton have got 11 games of football left to be played. And as each game passes by, the next becomes more important. And yes, we should be much higher up. We should be comfortably mid-table, not worrying about relegation. But we're not. We're not. We're 16th, 5 points above the drop, which isn't bad. Luton obviously lost to Villa on Saturday evening as well, which is positive. And again, I'm not saying sack the manager. He's the worst manager ever. It's the end of the world. But what I'm saying is we need to win a game of football. And that result, whilst the performance might not have been the worst in the world, that result on Saturday afternoon was absolutely terrible. It was nothing short of terrible, and it's incredibly worrying how many of these we've seen, and how many of these we've witnessed over the course of this season. Games of football at Goodison where Everton have been the better team, or categorically being the better team in terms of having more possession and having more shots at goal and more clear opportunities, etc., and we've still walked away having lost. That isn't good. It isn't good, especially when you're in a relegation battle. Should we be in a relegation battle? No, we should be comfortably mid-table. We all know that. But the reality is we are in a relegation battle. So we have to address things as such. And yeah, for me, it was incredibly, incredibly frustrating on Saturday evening. Incredibly, incredibly frustrating. I look ahead to this weekend then. We play Manchester United away from home. They sit 6th in the Premier League table. 27 games played, 14 wins, 2 draws and 11 defeats, 44 points. Obviously beat us 3-0 earlier in the season at Goodison Park as well. The first game back after the news of the points deduction. Yeah, this one will be incredibly difficult, as we know. Look, Man United are very hot and cold. Very up and down. Obviously, they lost in the Manchester derby on Sunday quite convincingly in the end. Did beat Forest in the FA Cup in midweek before that, but a loss to Fulham in the Premier League. Barely beaten Luton 2-1 prior to that. Beat Aston Villa 2-1, but their results at Old Trafford in terms of recent performances, as I said, that 2-1 defeat to Fulham in the last minute. Alex Iwobi scoring the winning goal there, of course. A 3-0 win against West Ham, 2-2 draw with Spurs, 3-2 win against Aston Villa, 3-0 defeat to Bournemouth, 2-1 win against Chelsea, and that takes you back to the beginning of December. So at Old Trafford, they are much, much better than what they are on the road, and obviously we know They've got some incredibly talented players at their disposal. Players like Marcus Rashford, who scored an absolute beauty on Sunday, probably going to win goal of the season, let's be honest. Rasmus Højlund, who's in really good form after a bit of a slow start. Obviously, Garnacho, who we know scored that overhead kick at Goodison Park. Mainu, who's come onto the scene recently and put some really good performances in. Casemiro, Scott McTominay, who I'm a huge fan of and would absolutely love at Everton Football Club. Yeah, this has got the hallmarks of one of them games that we don't expect much from, but end up getting something from. And what I mean by that is, often I always try and assess how I feel going into Everton games versus how I feel coming out of them. And the most angry I get and the most frustrated I get and the most upset I get is when I think going into a game, yeah, we absolutely can't afford to put in a poor performance here. We absolutely can't afford to lose. And then we go on and lose. And that's when the frustration builds. And then you have games like this where you sort of look and think, I'm not really expecting much from this. And often Everton come away with something from those games. Now, I'm not saying we will on this occasion because we've gone to Old Trafford plenty of times in recent years and lost convincingly and put really poor performances in. I think both times we went to Old Trafford last season, we went there in the FA Cup and we went there in the league. Both games were very much ones that we sort of never thought about again because they were really poor performances and we lost. And that has been the case numerous times over the years where we've gone there, we've been really poor, we've lost the game, or we've gone there, we've done really well, we've defended well for 60, 70 minutes, they've hit us on the counter, scored, and then ended up winning 2 or 3-0 because they've done it another couple of times. But I don't fancy us to get anything from this game because it would be silly of me to fancy Everton to go to Old Trafford and win, considering we've not done it in 11 years and we're in really poor form at the moment. But it wouldn't surprise me if Everton were to come away with a result. Now, I'm not saying I expect Everton to go there and pick up all 3 points, but it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world if Everton were to come away with a point from this game. Because Man United are susceptible to making mistakes. They are susceptible to conceding silly goals. Their goalkeeper has had plenty of mistakes in him this season. Okay, he's starting to settle a little bit more of late, but he still is capable of throwing an absolute howler. And, we know they've got a defensive unit that is capable of that as well. Johnny Evans has played a lot of football for Manchester United this season because of injuries, and he obviously is coming towards the latter stages of his career. Harry Maguire has played a lot of football for Manchester United, and again, we know he is susceptible to an edit as well. So I'm not confident by any sense of the imagination, but I feel like my expectation is that low for this game, that often when my expectation is this low for games, we tend to do relatively well. And we tend to come away with a result that we might not have expected. It was a little bit like that when we played Brighton a couple of weeks ago. I think the majority of us expected us to turn up at Brighton and lose, or certainly find it very, very difficult in that game. And really, we should have come away with 3 points. We were unlucky to not come away with all 3 points. If we managed the game better, we would have. So, who knows what this will bring? One thing is absolutely for sure, or 2 things are absolutely for sure. One of them is Everton need to start winning games of football because the performances at the moment are just not good enough. Take away whose fault it is. I'm not really interested whether it's Beto's fault or Calvert-Lewin's fault or Dyche's fault or Macheri's fault or John who lives down the road's fault. The reality is, whoever's fault it is, we ain't winning games of football. So we all need to come together, and everyone needs to do a bit more. The players need to do more. The manager needs to do more. The coaching team needs to do more. Everyone needs to do more so that we can get back on track and start winning games of football. And also, we are much, 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 much better away from home than we are at home. So, 2 years ago, as I said, we've got absolutely no chance. We're terrible away from home. We don't win away from home. We very rarely draw away from home. We're absolutely shocking. But this season, we have been much, much better away from home than we have been at home. So, it really wouldn't surprise me if Everton were to come away with something at the weekend. And it would be a massive, massive result, by the way. I don't think we've got a game after Saturday for a couple of weeks because of the break. So, yeah, we don't play till the 30th of March after Saturday. So that's 21 days of break, 3 weeks of rest, obviously, in between games. So it would be nice to go into that 3 week rest with a bit of positivity and with with a good result and a good performance to talk about, and with a bit of joy, because let's be honest, we have been starved of that for so long. When was the last time we as Evertonians had anything to sort of really be excited about or be happy about? It was probably Carlo Ancelotti's first season was the last time that we all generally were optimistic about the future of this football club. The only thing that resembles any form of positivity or optimism about Everton at the moment is the stadium, and even that is clouded in negativity and in pessimism because of the fact that, obviously the reason we've been given a points deduction is largely down to payments on the stadium. So even the one shining light of positivity at the moment is still being overshadowed by the never-ending negativity, seamlessly, at the football club. And it's not negativity for negativity's sake, by the way. And this is something that I've heard a little bit of late as well, of people saying, "Oh, just stop being so negative, stop being so glass half empty, be positive." Listen, if Everton had just come off the back of winning a treble, and we were now only on track to win the Premier League and the Champions League, and we'd just been kicked out the FA Cup, and I was coming on here and moaning and groaning and arguing and screaming, then yeah, I'd agree. Be a bit more optimistic, be a bit more glass half full. Things aren't that bad. Nobody has got the right to sit there and tell Evertonians that they can't be negative or they can't be worried about their football club. We've not had anything to cheer about in years. Absolute years. Never mind that. Beyond, there's one thing not having anything to cheer about. We had loads of years under David Moyes where we didn't really have anything to cheer about. But we also didn't have anything to be worried about or to be anxious about or to be concerned about. We just were there. We now have everything to be worried and concerned about and absolutely nothing to be excited about, barring a stadium, which, as I've said, again, it will be great move, lovely stadium, brilliant, etc, 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 but it has no impact on what happens on the pitch, does it? Or what's happening on the pitch. So, yeah, it would be nice for us to go into that international break with just something to hold on to, be excited about, have a little bit of a little bit of optimism about, have a little bit of excitement about. And it would do everybody the world of good. It would do the fans the world of good. It would do the players the world of good. And it would do the manager the world of good as well. I'm not saying I expect us to go and win at Old Trafford, or I think we should go and win at Old Trafford. But if we were to win at Old Trafford, it would be huge. Because not only would it be a big, big win, and that would help the confidence and the general feeling around the football club, but it would also be a historic win against a club that we haven't necessarily done brilliantly against away from home in recent years, which would also be massive as well. So, yeah, this is a huge opportunity. What I don't want is I don't want to see a performance from the players that screams, we're off for a few weeks now, so we just want to get through this and get home. I want to see a performance which screams, we've been absolutely terrible of late and the performances and results haven't been good enough, so let's go into the break off a big game and a big result, hopefully, because ultimately the players are to blame, as is the manager, as is the board, as is the owner, etc, etc. But the players can't look at this and think, right, let's just get through this, and because we're in a bit of a rough time at the moment. Well, we're in a bit of a rough time because their quality and ability on the pitch isn't there, and it needs to be there for us to pick up points and win games and ultimately stay in the Premier League. So they've got something to prove and they've got something to show. And as much as the manager wants to tell us they're absolutely working their hardest and giving their all, we need more, because it's not good enough at the moment. It's not good enough, and hopefully As I say, we come away from Old Trafford with a positive result on Saturday afternoon. Like I said before, this is the new format of the podcast, so there will be no instant match reaction. I might do a like 1 minute instant reaction on sort of TikTok, and I might upload it to YouTube Shorts, and then I might include it in next week's podcast, so you can sort of get my instant emotional thoughts, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the game, a few days later when things have settled and a little bit more calmer. But yeah, this is a huge opportunity for Everton, and one that I think, again, we'd be silly to throw up and just say, oh, we'll forget it. We'll just, we've got a few weeks off now, so we'll just forget about this and look forward to that. No, we have to put a performance in, and we have to try and come away with a result. If we don't, then, again, it's just Groundhog Day, in it. We go again like we do every week. But yeah, it is a big opportunity. It is a big opportunity ultimately. Let's talk a little bit about Jared Branthwaite then, because he has been in the media of late. According to Sammy Mockbell of the Daily Mail, Gareth Southgate is considering calling him up to international duty, and according to Adrian Kanjuba, Everton are keeping tabs on Hull City defender Jacob Greaves ahead of the summer transfer window amid interest from Manchester United and Tottenham for Jared Branthwaite. Again, we all know how good Jared has been this season. We all know how pivotal he's been to Everton and to our defence. A defence that is up there with the most clean sheets in the Premier League this season. He has been a huge part of that, and a huge reason for Everton's position in the table. And I know a lot of people credit Sean Dyche for where we are at the moment, but and that's fair and that's understandable, but I think Jared deserves a lot of credit as well, because no disrespect to Michael Keane or Ben Godfrey, but I think had we have started with Tarkowski and one of them two at centre-back as opposed to Jared, I don't think we'd be where we are in the table now, I'll be perfectly honest. Do we want him to get an international call-up? Well, selfishly, probably not, no, because we want him to remain at Everton. We want him to stay fit. We don't want him to play any extra games or give him any extra sort of reason to pick up an injury and then therefore not be available for us. But the reality of the situation is this would be a huge opportunity for Jared, and I'm sure this is something that he's dreamt about since he was a little boy, and it would be lovely to see him achieve that, because he deserves it. He deserves it. He is miles better than a lot of these centre-halves that people talk about in this country, who frequently get call-ups to the England national team, and he deserves his opportunity to show his quality. Unfortunately for us, that likely means that he will attract more interest, and therefore, it will be harder for Everton to keep him in the summer transfer window. But we all know that we're in that sort of position anyway. He's playing week in, week out really well in the Premier League. There's going to be interest for him, and ultimately Everton have got to manage that. But yeah, it will be really interesting to see if Gareth Southgate takes that jump, because it would be a risk, because he's a young player and it's his first season, and Gareth Southgate typically leans more on the sort of elder, more experienced players. But you couldn't deny that he doesn't deserve it, because he absolutely does deserve it. He's been absolutely phenomenal for Everton this season, and if he was performing the way he is for Everton, for any of the top six sides, it wouldn't even be a discussion point. He'd be in that team sort of ASAP. So, yeah, I think it would be great to see. I know a lot of us selfishly will be a bit frustrated by it, but you can't really be anything other than happy for him, can you? And excited for him. If it does happen, obviously, we'll wait and see if that's the case. Matthews, also at the Daily Mail, reported that Premier League officials will meet 777 co-founder Josh Wonder this week to discuss the takeover of Everton. The American group are interpreting this as a positive development. Yeah. As for the takeover stuff, again, another thing that has been getting me, and I'm sure a lot of you, down constantly over the course of the last few weeks and months, but hopefully this is coming to an end. I am at that stage with this now that I was with the appeal process a couple of weeks ago, where I don't really care what the outcome is now. I just want this to be resolved. And I know some people will say, oh, we don't want them to take over Cam because they're absolutely terrible and this, that, the other. Look, there's a lot in the media to suggest that these would be terrible for Everton Football Club. There's a lot in the media to suggest that this would be a really, really dangerous move for Everton. But we also know as a fact that Farhad Moshiri has been an absolute disgrace to Everton Football Club, and he has ran this club into the ground as well. So it's sort of it's weighing it up, isn't it? And at the end of the day, none of us really truly know how 777 will run Everton and how successful or unsuccessful they will be at doing that. We know Farhad Moshiri is unsuccessful at doing it because we've had 8 years of it and he's proven it. We don't know with 777, and that's not me saying I'm behind them and I trust them and whatever. I am as anxious and worried and as sort of pessimistic as I'm sure you all are about it, but I just want the process to be over. I'm sick of hearing about points deductions. I'm sick of hearing about takeovers. I just want it all to be done so we can focus on playing footy, because ultimately winning games of footy is what puts you in positions to buy better players and to climb the table and earn more money. So that needs to be the focus at the moment. And I think the sooner we get that as the focus, the easier it will become. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. There you go. That is the first episode of the Mighty Blues podcast. We've spoken about the West Ham game. We've spoken about the Man United game. We've spoken about everything in between. Let us know your thoughts. Listen, as I explained in the video I uploaded earlier today, if you haven't watched that, please go and do so. It's really important. This is going to be the format now. From now on, every Wednesday, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about everything Everton, and we're going to go through it in one sort of big video. We'll have guests on, we'll have various different segments. It will be much more entertaining and interactive than this, but this was the first episode, and as I said, I haven't really planned this, so I just wanted to sit down and talk. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed listening to it on Spotify or Apple Podcast, thank you very much. If you've watched on YouTube, like usual, thank you all so much for getting involved. And yeah, we'll see how this goes. We'll see what the response is like, and if it's hopefully positive, then I'll see you next week on the next episode. But just before we go, I just want to once again say a massive thank you to everybody who commented or tweeted or wrote me a message about the video I uploaded earlier. It's honestly, it's helped me so much, and it touched me in a way that I never thought it would. So I just want to say thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. Anyway, if you've enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe, give us a top rating on the podcast platforms if you're listening there as well. Big thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon.